We're going to look at a simple example about converting arrays to array list objects using the arrays class API. Let's look at an example. Here's a string array. We can see here that the length of this array is 4. And one thing we might like to be able to do is consider what would happen if we had a different array that had some duplicates in it. And perhaps to remove those duplicates, we'd create a set. In order to create the set, we have to have a bridge, as we'll see in the documentation, between the arrays API, this is an array, and the collections API. One collection might be an array list. So I can create a list of strings, and I'll say some more about why I'm using list here in a second. I'll call it AL using the arrays.aslist method with my array A as a parameter. Now we can see that AL has 6 elements in it. I can see the elements in the array list 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So AL is an array list and A is an array. As we can see in the documentation here for this method, aslist returns a fixed size backed by the specified array. Let's look at two things, backed by and fixed size. So backed by means, let's look at the 0th element of the array and the 0th element of the array list. Because this is A is an array, I use the bracket to index it. Because AL is an array list, I use get to index it. If I set the element at index 0 of the array list to fish, I can see that the array list AL is 1 fish 3, 4, 1, 2. But the array A has also been changed because the array A backs the array list. They both refer to the same underlying storage. So it's similar to what would happen if I had said B gets A. Now I have A, B. Those are just two labels to the same array. So if I change B sub 4 to star, I can see that I've changed B and 0, 1, 2, 3, that's star. But I also changed A because I had originally signed A to B. So they're just essentially aliases to the same thing. And the array list also has star because, as you recall, perhaps, the AL array list was created with this line. Let me scroll through them. I converted the array to an array list by using arrays.aslist. Because of that, the array list AL is backed by the array A. Now, notice I used list rather than array list. And when I look at the documentation, it's clear that this method returns a list of type strings. That's pretty much the same as an array list, but it's a fixed size, as we saw. So for example, if it had been an array list, I would expect I would be able to say something like al.add, because add is a method that works with array lists. But in this case, I get an unsupported operation exception, which I wouldn't get if I had an array list. Let's call this XX is new array list. XX can clearly have an element added to it. But now I can say xx.addAll my list AL. And now I can see that it has what I first gave it plus all the elements after that because I used addAll. That can be very handy using this bridge between the array-based and collection-based API. So I'm using arrays.aslist method. We can see it's static, which is why when I invoked it, I used arrays.aslist because it's a static method. Have fun.